Hey everyone, Stegar here and welcome back to Fairview. In today's episode we're going to be building a waste transfer facility and a small vineyard near the edge of the city. We also have two guest builds to showcase later in the episode by Dirty Hethen and by Pingyao. So to start off this episode, I started by building the waste transfer station and just placing down this asphalt road by Ironic 69 and making a loop so that cars can drive up to the transfer part and like turn around or whatever and drive back out. And here's just making like a booth where they can weigh vehicles as they come in and also on the way out, and just putting some markings in between these lines as well. And yeah, just placing them down. Anyway, I wanted to create a waste transfer station here today because I feel like the city is small enough that it wouldn't have its own landfill, and that would be somewhere else that serves maybe the whole region, including a larger city. And we already have a recycling centre in a different part of the city, and that actually functions to the capacity that we require for the city. So this one isn't going to be functional at all in terms of serving the purposes of garbage collection in the game, but it's here anyway that people could in theory take their rubbish to, even though they can't because it's just a game and there's no reason for them to. But yeah, it's just here so that, you know, people can drop things off and then some truck comes up and picks that up and takes it to wherever the main landfill site is for this region, which might be like a few towns over or even further away. I'm not really sure. All I know about waste management is that nowadays we tend to kind of collect it in certain places and then ship it off to one big facility rather than having smaller landfills in every town or whatever. Or at least that's been my experience in New Zealand anyway. But here it's just placing down these piles of trash by Ivania, as well as some random little vanilla props, and kind of sitting them in there to make it seem like people have been throwing TVs and bits of wood and random things down here, as you would if you don't want them anymore and can't find any way to sell them on to anyone else. So it's just like a bunch of different trash piles and things, and then kind of just moving over to fence off this area, even though it's probably, you know, it probably serves like absolutely no purpose almost, and just placing down a few random little bushes and trees and things along the side there too. And then I think now we're moving on to like the actual service entrance for workers to come in, as well as the garbage trucks that drive around the city, and they can come in and drop off all the garbage and things to this facility, where it then gets managed and loaded onto larger trucks that take it away to wherever this hypothetical landfill site is, somewhere in a different city. And here's just like some sort of staircase thing to get down to the parking lot from up here. Since it's quite a steep cliff, I felt like it was necessary for the workers to have their own staircase. And to do the railings, I converted a pipe prop to procedural objects, and then kind of angled it and scaled it in a way so that, as you can see here, it sort of just goes up that whole place, and then copied that bit over and rotated it around in a particular way to get the actual supports of that railing so that it looks like it's connected to the staircase and not just like floating and things. And using the text option in procedural objects to change the colors and sort of do a whole lot of different things that cause it to not have all the little markings that were originally on the props. I mean, it's mainly just changing the color using the text option, and you basically just painting over the whole texture with a solid color there. And the way the game works in the shadows, it sort of like still creates that shadow effect. And here's a little area where people can dump like used pesticide containers or weed killer or whatever, since they don't want them going into the general landfill. So they put them to the side here, and they get collected, and I don't really know how that works, but they get taken off somewhere else and dealt with, or whatever the case may be. But there's also going to be a sign here telling people, like, put the contaminated containers and things here rather than in the general landfill. And I think I'm going to move on to that in a second once I've finished doing these walls and things. But yeah, the walls are just there to kind of section the area off, and here I was using one of those walls and scaling it in a certain way and colouring it with the text option, procedural objects, just the rectangle selection thing, and then doing a whole lot of text editing to write a sign basically telling people what they should and shouldn't put in this area, and also say something about e-waste in a second, like see stuff about e-waste or something. And then I think I also copied a similar sign later on into a different area, but here I'm just placing down some vanilla props to kind of fill up this place. I mean, you know, these actually look fairly okay for the purpose that I want them to serve. And here's the other sign that I was making, which is basically saying, like, don't dump e-waste and other things into the general landfill, and do something else with that instead. I think I also put in a Greenwaste site later in the episode, like basically you just go there and put all your dead leaves and things, and which I imagine would be quite full, and you can see it's quite full later in the episode, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, like a few minutes ahead of myself. And anyway, here we're just kind of connecting up this area where trucks can drive through into the main landfill area, and you know, there's going to be like a bulldozer there, kind of pushing all the waste around, and then something else loading it onto the trucks that might come and pick it up and transport it to another place, as well as just a few random little I think these are actually recycling trucks, but I imagine they're garbage trucks as well. Just pick up the garbage, and since they're not in use today or whatever in the city, I guess they're just parked up here, or the one by the pile I imagine is like full and come back to drop off some stuff before going back out and picking up more rubbish. But also just putting a few cars up there that's like tradespeople come in their pickups to drop off whatever rubbish they have from the building site or whatever, and just placing down this little farm field here and putting a few pigs in, if it ever speeds up enough for the pigs to show up. And also like a little site office thing in the main part down on the bottom where people could go have their lunch break or store something. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to have cinematics of this part, and then I'll come back in and kind of do some modifications to what we've already built. So after getting to this point, I felt like the area was actually a bit oversized and like really not to scale as what I was thinking, so I just dragged this road in and kind of scaled it down, and then kind of changed all these decals around and ended up putting some different sort of stain decals that are meant for concrete, but I put them on here and also like cut that down, and I think here is where I copied the stain decal over and just placed it down a few more times. And I also moved that wall off camera, but I feel like that you kind of get the idea of how to move a wall and don't really need to keep seeing people do that all the time. Anyway, here I'm creating like the Greenwaste place where people can come and drop their leaves and dead branches and things, and this probably gets managed and taken off somewhere to decompose or something, but this is where people drop them off anyway. And I was just using these garbage piles as like the piles of leaves, but then kind of modifying them around the edges, and then in a second you'll see me kind of change the color with procedural objects to make them more green, even though brown is probably more kind of realistic in Autumn City. I wasn't really thinking about that at the time, so for the moment they're green, and I might change that another time. And yeah, it was kind of unusual way that I tried to do this in terms of lining them up and everything, but it worked out in the end, and also going around the other side. And here is kind of an opportunity for you to see a chance of me just messing around with procedural objects for ages, just to try and get this all to work. I mean, I think some of this footage is sped up like 10 times or something, so what you're seeing now is like a very sped up version of what I was actually doing, which took quite a while, as there's a lot of vertices here that needed to be modified and things in order to look alright and not stick out the side of the wall. And also doing some more here, as you'll see me do in a minute. And I feel like this is just a place where, you know, you've done like the town gardener or whatever comes here mainly to drop off all their waste, and maybe if you're doing your gardening you just put it in the back corner of your section where you don't really care about whether there's leaves and stuff or something. But I was also putting some stains down to make the concrete not look so kind of like monotone, and making a sign here too that just says like Greenwaste, so that people actually know where to go and stuff. And yeah, basically just fiddling around with this. I probably could have cut a little bit more out of this, but I chose not to, and now I have to speak over it and just copying the color off that one onto that one, over to that sign, to make sure we get the correct colors as like part of the branding, I guess, of this place. And then moving on to making a whole lot of farm fields around me. And you just see me make the fence for one, but I think there's like 4 or 5 that I cut through in the next like 30 seconds or something, and just basically placing down these rural wire fences that are networks, and using the electrics mod to kind of like, I just overlap the fences and then use that mod to kind of like create the junctions that aren't necessarily there in the first place, and also then just delete the little overhanging bits. And here we're going to move on to building this like vineyard, I guess it is. It's kind of just like a hobbyist place, and while I was building this I really had no idea what this farm would be. I just started off thinking it would be a random farm, and just placed down like this random vanilla house, which is act as the farmhouse, and also placing down like this construction site that was converted to procedural objects, and yeah, just basically making that as like an extension to that main house, and making some barns, even though I didn't end up using these, and just ended up using this different shelter instead, and placing that down in a second. It seems as though my editing is not quite up to my own standard in this episode, so it's like I can't even talk over this time lapse. But anyway, there I was just like deleting a little bit of the concrete around there, because I think it's a bug with the Building Anarchy mod that it's just all turned to concrete. And when I was deleting the gravel around that bit, I realized that actually deleting the gravel around that vanilla dirt road doesn't look so bad, so I just went along and did that for the whole road. And here just placing down some trees along the driveway, as I like to do, because this makes like a nice little shot to like post on Reddit or something. I think I already have posted a shot on Reddit of that particular area, and you know, it got a decent amount of attention, as I sort of expected. But anyway, here I'm just like detailing around the backyard of this house, so that, I don't know, the children can go play, and someone can grow their vegetables or something in those flower beds. And then I kind of switched back over to placing down a whole lot of trees around this area, as well as by the entranceway, and also making another sign with procedural objects and the text option, as you'll see here. And it just basically is there so that people, when they're driving along the road, can see this, even though there's a lot of trees in the way. I mean, usually from my experience, when there are signs on the road, there tends to be trees in the way blocking your view, and it is like super annoying, because it's like, why would you put the sign there and then trees are blocking it? But anyway, I basically just duplicated this and put it on the other side, so that the upside down text was sort of hidden because of the way that the textures are mapped on here, and also I'd lowered it down since some of the textures were showing on the sides of that wall, and it looked a bit unusual. And here was kind of the point where I decided what this farm would be, and I decided that it'd be a vineyard, so I just started basically copying this fence and placing it down in like rows of grapevines or whatever. And since it's like late autumn, I guess there are no grapes on the vines since they've all been picked and the leaves have fallen off and everything, and it just looks bare. I mean, that's obviously a little bit too bare since it's literally just a fence, but that was all I was really prepared to do here, and just placing a few more around here. And then I think we go around in a second and do some other farm fields out the front, or that might be coming up in just a second. Yeah, we place some farm fields down the front by painting that out, and then we're going to actually move over into these guest builds that I've been lucky enough to have in the city. So our first guest build today is by Pingyao. You've built a abandoned factory here for us, and what was your inspiration for building this factory?
Oh, hi Stegar. Thank you for the opportunity to build in Fairview. Well, I think probably the main inspiration was some Google images that I saw of a kind of collapsed roof structure, and that was really the starting point for the build. Everything else kind of just grew from there really. So I used Move It predominantly just to make the collapsed roof structure, and then just added some warehouses and bits and pieces around that. But I didn't really have anything in my head, I just kind of worked it out as I went along really.
Yeah, well, you've done an excellent job here, even including all the autumn trees and stuff, to really capture that feel that I've been going for in Fairview.
Well, that was quite cool actually, to use the autumn trees, because I mean the cities I'm doing at the moment are just typical summer, boring summer trees, but it was quite nice to use these kind of autumn colours.
Because you're also doing a city set in New England, but it's sort of set more in the summertime?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it would be a lot of work to change those trees now, so I'm stuck with it. Although I'm quite jealous of your autumnal vibe, but it's certainly that kind of neck of the woods, that kind of New England way, yeah.
Yeah, because you've also covered a really big area and kind of helped me get closer to finishing this project.
Yeah, I mean, the area you gave me was a bit bigger than that actually, and I felt probably I didn't need to cover the whole thing. With this build, you'll see there is quite a bit of open space there, and that I kind of imagined that you'd have, maybe that was a car park or a sort of area where there was lots of sort of containers or something, or even maybe there was a building there once that's been demolished. But the other reason to have that kind of empty space was just to get some nice screenshots really, because otherwise it's too kind of restricted if you've just got loads of buildings filling it up. So hopefully that kind of, like, you've got the warehouse section, you've got the kind of chimney and the grain silos on the side there, and then you've got that kind of vacant plot area. Those kind of three areas I think hopefully kind of work together.
Yeah, because I mean, Fairview is a pretty spread out city, so it kind of makes sense that they'd have that land there for trucks to park up and other things to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's almost telling a story with the build to some extent. But it's also trying to make the thing look like it was once an operational factory of some description.
Yeah, because I mean, in the next episode I end up building a whole lot of other little warehouses and things around this area to fill up the rest of that space that I gave you the option to build in.
Yeah, so that'll kind of work with this build.
Yeah. Oh well, if you don't know Pingyao, go check out his channel, and I'll leave a link down in the description so you can do that.
Yeah, I'd love to see new viewers. It's always fun to have new people watch the vids and see the cities. So yeah, thanks very much for that, Stegar.
Yeah, and now we'll move on to Dirty Hethen's guest build. So now we're here with Dirty Hethen, and he's built us a nice farm today.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So here in New Zealand, we see heaps of these, and that was my inspiration for making it. And America also is a contributor with dairy products, so it sort of made sense to make this, as Fairview is an American-based city.
Yeah, and I mean, you've really gone all out with the detail with the little bushes and things, Personally, I wouldn't go that deep into detail. I'd just focus on the trees and stuff and put trees down the driveway instead.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for detail, I must admit, and working on the city that I'm working at the moment, I don't really get a chance to work with, trying to make things as realistic as possible, so I probably have gone a little bit overboard with it.
Yeah, because I mean, your Minos series is quite different since it's a sci-fi city and set in the future.
Yeah, and that's what made this farm really enjoyable to make, because it's such a contrast to that. It's so different, and it was a lot of fun, man, and it looks great in the city.
Tell us a bit about Minos anyway.
So Minos is a concept city, space city, and just to spice it up, it's based on Europa, which is Jupiter's fourth largest moon. And yeah, it's as crazy as it sounds right there. It is, it's pretty nuts. It's way different from anything I've built in the past, but there's so many good assets and mods with the game now that allow you to change everything about it and really just mold it into whatever you want. And I just took the whole city building concept and did something really different with it, and it's really enjoyable to work in there.
Yeah, it's a really different build to watch. I mean, it's kind of on that level of City Walk in terms of how it stands out.
Yeah, well, he has been a huge influence, man. There's no doubt about it. His assets and stuff that he's brought out, and the way that he builds with the roads as conveyor belts, I've really just taken that idea and tweaked it a little bit for Minos. So yeah, what he's done there is incredible.
Yeah, likewise, because I mean, Prez has kind of given me some inspiration from his New Windsor series into how to make this one look fairly decent anyway.
Yeah, it definitely helps with those guys pumping out the quality of work that they do.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, man. I appreciate you getting me involved.
Yeah, thank you for your build anyway. It's been a great pleasure to have you building in my city, and maybe even I'll build in yours someday.
Yeah, I'd like that, man, I would. And yeah, thanks again, man. Been a blast.
So if you want to go check out Dirty Hethen's channel, I'll leave a link down in the description, along with a link to Pingyao's channel. And on your way down there, don't forget to tap the like button if you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.